In today's video, I'm going to be going through 10 players who I think are the 10 most underrated players in the NBA right now. One of the more interesting things as a guy who watches the NBA a lot, analyzes the NBA pretty much every single day, and talks about the NBA a lot, is realizing how you have different opinions than everyone else and which players you have far different opinions on when it comes to other people and also how they're viewed through the media. And if you're a guy like me who watches the NBA, analyzes the NBA a ton, and also sees tons of posts on YouTube and Instagram and comments on YouTube and Instagram about different player comparisons, player rankings, and different things about different players and teams in the NBA, you're gonna have players that you think are underrated and overrated. And also, if you're a guy like me, these are terms you're gonna be really familiar with, and I wanted to talk about it today just so I could give you guys my opinions on it. So before we get into it, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my new NBA videos that I post pretty much 2 or 3 times a week. And also, if you guys want to see an overrated video where I look at the players that I think are the 10 most overrated players in the NBA, let's get this video to 30 likes and I'll make that video as well. So if you want to see the overrated video, it'll be really controversial, but if you guys want to see it, leave a like on this video, get it to 30 likes, and I'll make that video as well. So with that being said, let's get started with the 10 most underrated players from my viewpoint in the NBA. The first player I'm going to be discussing who I think is really underrated is Bogdan Bogdanovic of the Jazz. Bogdan Bogdanovic rarely gets any recognition, and he's a really valuable role player for the Utah Jazz right now, putting up around 16 points per game this season, which is a little bit down from last season, and I also think he was probably one of, if not the most underrated players in the league last season, and that's when he was averaging 20 points per game, but this season he's still having an amazing impact, especially shooting the basketball, shooting around 38% from 3 this season, as I mentioned, on 16 points per game. He's not a great defender, he's around an average defender, at least in my opinion, but he does do pretty good things on the defensive end of the floor, like defend the post well and uses size to his advantage, and he's also a really underrated playmaker. He does a great job of looking from the post, which also is a very great part of his game. He has great court vision, makes a few great passes from the post, also gets a lot of buckets from the post, turning around and shooting and also backing his way into the post, and does a great job on the perimeter of, like I mentioned, shooting, but also making the extra pass and having great awareness out there, and doing a great job of helping the Jazz's offense flow and really be one of the best in the league. When it comes to the Jazz and what they've done this season, all the attention goes to obviously Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but also role players like Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson, and I don't think Bojan gets enough recognition. The next one I'm going to be discussing is really underrated is Darren Fox of the Sacramento Kings. He's having a breakout season and really should be considered one of the top candidates for some most improved player, and he doesn't really get enough attention because of how he plays for the Sacramento Kings. I look at a guy like Ja Morant, and the other day on Instagram I saw a poll of Ja Morant versus Darren Fox where Ja Morant was winning 76% to 24, and I'll put their stats for the season up on the screen right now, as well as the fact that Darren Fox is a little bit of a better defender than Ja Morant, but overall I really think that Darren Fox is pretty underrated. He doesn't get enough attention because he plays in Sacramento. His scoring package is very good and efficient, and this season he's putting up around 25 points per game and it's going completely unnoticed. His playmaking and defense is also really underrated, and some people might say he's putting up more empty stats because he plays on the Kings, but I really don't believe in empty stats. Darren Fox is an incredible player who's having his talents wasted on a bad team, and because of this he's not getting any recognition. If you were to swap him onto a winning team, you'd still see his impact and how good of an overall player he is. He's breaking out this season and needs to get more recognition for what he's doing. From what I've seen from Darren Fox this season, he's easily a top 30 player in the NBA, and originally I don't think a lot of people will agree with me here just because they don't really know how good Darren Fox has been this season because he's not getting enough recognition. I think he's a top 30 player in the NBA, is really underrated, and will deserve to make the All-Star team next year. The third player who I think is really underrated right now is Josh Hart of the New Orleans Pelicans, and Hart is one of those players that doesn't get enough recognition recognition and love, especially from fans, because he doesn't have that play style that fans like to watch and that media likes to praise. And because of this, Josh Hart is really underrated, and he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. I've watched him play, and I truly think he's the best defender on the New Orleans Pelicans right now. He doesn't just do a great job of contesting shots and defending the perimeter, but he also has great interior defense, especially for his size, and is truly one of the better defenders in the post in the entire NBA. I've watched a lot of Pelicans games this season because Zion is my favorite player in the NBA, and watching Josh Hart play, especially on the defensive end of the floor, is a treat to watch. He's really underrated and just doesn't get enough recognition because he's not a flashy player. He's also one of the best rebounding, if not the best rebounding guards in the NBA. Again, something that goes unnoticed by a lot of fans and media, and on the offensive end provides about 10 points per game consistently and has a great 3-point shot. He's a really underrated overall player. The next player I'm going to be discussing is Nicolas Claxton of the Brooklyn Nets. If you guys watch my channel and have been subscribed for a while, you know that I'm pretty much the biggest Brooklyn Nets doubter out there, and I've pretty much made 2 separate videos specifically on why they will not make the NBA Finals this year. And one of them was talking about some other teams that will make the NBA Finals, in my opinion, instead. But I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are good enough to make the finals because of their defense and how they have the 22nd ranked defense in the NBA right now, and the last 20 champions have had top 11 defenses. And even though they have KD, Harden, and Kyrie, the key to success for them in the playoffs is going to be Nicolas Claxton. And this seems ridiculous, but Claxton's their only really good defender. And because of how good he is on the defensive end of the floor, I think he's really underrated and is really their true key to success. He's not only a great rim protector and an amazing pick and roll defender, but he's so versatile that the Nets' main strategy down the stretch in games is using the 1-5 switch so that Claxton can guard the other team's point guard when it comes to things like screen action and overall just guarding them at the end of shot clocks and in ISO situations. Overall, especially on the defensive end of the floor, he's very good and valuable to this team and has become underrated because of how people aren't fully recognizing his defensive impact. On the offensive end of the floor, he's not much, but he's a really consistent lob threat for guys like Harden and Kyrie, and on both ends of the floor, especially defensively, is going to be this team's key to success. The next player I'm going to be discussing who I think is really underrated is Robert Williams, who's the backup center for the Boston Celtics right now and is extremely underrated because of his overall impact, especially on the defensive end of the floor. He uses his size to his advantage on the defensive end of the floor, and I've seen him a lot this season, really just protecting the rim at an elite level, and he's also one of the better rebounders in the NBA. He's still not getting as many minutes as I think he deserves. I think he should really be the Celtics' main center and their defensive anchor because of how good he is on that end of the floor, and he also does a great job on the offensive end of the floor in the pick and roll, rolling to the basket, and getting a lot of lobs and cleaning up the glass and being very efficient around the rim. If you guys watch my channel, you know I don't like to use advanced stats often. I don't really believe in them that much, but Robert Williams ranks 3rd among centers in PER, which is player efficiency rating, and it really just measures the overall productivity for each player in each minute that they play, and he's 3rd in the NBA among centers in PER, behind the 2 best centers in the league, Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. It really shows how productive of a player Williams is on both ends of the floor, and he's really underrated and isn't getting enough recognition yet. Another player who I think is really underrated is Kawhi Leonard, and this one's going to come across as weird because it's weird to call one of the best players in the league underrated, but I'm going to keep this one pretty short because I already made an entire video on why I think Kawhi Leonard is the most underappreciated player of all time. You can go check that out if you want as well, just to see the full details, but overall I just really think that Kawhi gets overshadowed by some of the more flashy best players in the league like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and obviously LeBron James. But Kawhi is still, in my opinion, a top 3 player in the league and is pretty much having an MVP type of season this season, and it's going completely unnoticed because he's getting overshadowed, and because of this he's become underrated. Another underrated player is another center, and it's Daniel Gafford, and ever since he's been traded to the Washington Wizards, he's pretty much taken off and has improved a ton, and it's because of the opportunity that he's getting there, but people don't realize just how impactful of a player Daniel Gafford is on the defensive end of the floor. He's one of the better better rim protectors in the NBA. There's tons of great rim protectors in the NBA today, but Gafford's up there. He has an amazing impact, especially in the pick and roll as well, and overall protecting the rim, and is pretty versatile defensively as well. It's no secret that the Wizards' defense sucks, but ever since Gafford's got there, they've been winning games, and he's having such an amazing impact on their team that it's actually changing their record, put them in the 10 seed, and I'm not saying it's just because of him, but his impact on the defensive end of the floor has a ton to do with this. He's also taken his scoring from pretty much 5 points per game for his career consistently up to 10 with the Wizards, and is showing his overall offensive production as well. He's still not getting enough recognition though, and he's really one of the better defensive players in the league, and because he hasn't gotten noticed for this yet by everyone across the NBA community, I definitely consider him underrated. Another underrated player out there right now is Trent Jr, and he can pretty much do it all on the floor. When we look at the offensive side of the floor, he's averaging about 20 points per game since he's got to the Raptors, which is really all-star level, especially when you look at the way that he's scoring the basketball. He can create his own shot a lot and takes a lot of step backs, can score very efficiently in the mid-range and from 3, shooting very efficiently from 3 as well. He's a pretty good playmaker, can make the extra passes pretty aware out there on the court. He needs to mature a little bit with his IQ and just being a little bit more aware out there on both ends, but also defensively is one of the better on-ball defenders in the NBA, does a great job, can pretty much guard anyone out there on the floor, and we saw last year how he even did things like hold LeBron James in check in that series of the Lakers versus the Trailblazers, and really this entire season Trent's been underrated. He can pretty much do it all out there on the floor, and like I mentioned, has pretty much taken his game to a next level since he's got to the Raptors, and is getting quite a bit of recognition, but I still think he's underrated and people are sleeping on his potential. He could be an all-star one day if he keeps this up. The second last player I'm going to be talking about who I think is underrated is Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier has been averaging around 20 points per game this season on very good efficiency for his play style and for a point guard. He doesn't do much out there on the floor other than scoring. He's not a great defender and not a great playmaker for his position, but he's averaging 20 points per game this season on great efficiency. He can score anywhere on the court and is also one of the more clutch players in the NBA, but a lot of the attention on the Hornets goes to a younger, more hyped up player by the media like LaMelo Ball, who may or may not be in the Overrated video if I end up making that. But Terry's underrated. He doesn't get a lot of attention for a guy that averages 20 points per game, and I think he's underrated because of this. The last player I'm going to be discussing who I think is underrated is Christian Wood, and this one might be a little bit more controversial because Wood has gotten a lot of recognition this season as he's breaking out, but I still think he's underrated. I don't think people realize just how good of a scorer he is at the rim. He's one of the best bully ball players in the NBA, and you might not believe that if you don't watch him play because of his skinny frame, but I've watched him play a lot this season. He's one of the best bully ball players still in the NBA and does a great job of scoring in the post, and he's probably the best center in the league at rolling to the basket. He gets a lot of easy lobs in the pick and roll, and it's because of how he's so good at cutting to the basket, and he also does a great job of getting layups and has a nice touch with his floater around the rim and is one of the best scorers in the NBA when it comes to scoring at the rim. He's also added a really consistent 3-point shot this season and is improving his overall defense. So because of this, I still think he's underrated and is getting slept on, especially because he's on the Rockets and doesn't get enough recognition. I think people need to realize that when Christian Wood's on the Rockets, they're pretty much a team that's contending for a playoff spot. But when he's not on the team this season, they actually have a record of 4-19, and that really just speaks to his impact on the offensive end of the floor. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video. That's my opinion on who I think are the 10 most underrated players in the NBA right now. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this is a really interesting topic, especially for us that follow the NBA a lot and also are on social media, see lots of information about the NBA and different viewpoints, and we all have different opinions, especially on underrated and overrated players. So for this video, comment down below any of the players on my list that you agree with or that you disagree with, and comment down below any other players that you think are underrated in the NBA right now. Thank you all for watching this video. As I mentioned, if you're new, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next video.